Hi, my name's Jamie from Beacon Consultant Services. Thanks for tuning in to our 6th video on the A to Z of GDPR. Today we're going to be focusing on F for fines. Now this is arguably one of the biggest changes that was introduced by GDPR. Gone are the days where the ICO can fine you up to £500,000 per incident for breaching data protection. GDPR introduces a much more substantial fine that can be given to organisations that flout the rules. So there are 2 tiers of fine, the maximum of which is up to €20 million or 4% of annual group turnover for the previous year, and the standard tier fine, which is €10 million or 2% of group turnover for the previous year. So it's an eye-watering amount of money now that companies can be fined if they get this wrong. And you may have seen in the news recently a provisional fine dished out, the first under the GDPR regime, of £183 million. So it's not a small amount of money we're talking about now. So it also encourages people to be less risk-based when it comes to data protection and to treat the data with the rights that it deserves. But this can also have a reputational and brand damage to your organisation as well. So it's not just about the fines, think about the press that comes along with those fines and the damage to that reputation that you can have. But there are a number of aggregating factors that the ICO will look at when they're determining how much to fine an organisation. They won't just go in with the highest tier or highest amount. They'll take some things into consideration to determine how much they'll be fining you. So to list a few, I won't go through them all, the nature, gravity and duration of the infringement, whether this was an intentional or a negligent breach, what actions the organisation has taken to mitigate the damage, any previous infringements, and interestingly the degree of cooperation with the ICO. So there are others, but that should give you a flavour of the sorts of things that they'll look at. So now we'll look at some of the instances in which fines will be dished out. Well, let's start with the top tier maximum fines first, which could incur the €20 million or 4% of group turnover fines. I'll just go through some examples, I won't go through all of them. But failure to adhere to any of the 6 principles relating to the processing of personal data, failure to ensure lawful processing of data, failure to demonstrate that the individual has consented to processing, failure to provide individuals with transparent information, so all that privacy information you need to give people to let them know how you're processing their data. And you'll see at the bottom of the slide here, the rights. So where you're not dealing with rights appropriately, that could incur one of these high tier fines as well. So some more examples here, you'll see the rest of the rights at the top of this slide. And then the remainder of the bits and pieces on this slide are really to do with the failure to ensure appropriate transfer mechanisms in place. So those are the high tier fines, those are the things that you could achieve a high tier fine for. Now the standard tier fines, which could incur up to €10 million or 2% of worldwide annual turnover, whichever is the greater. So again, I'll just run through some examples. So failing to implement appropriate technical and organisational measures. So that's making sure that your systems and your processes ensure security. Failure by a controller to use a processor which provides sufficient guarantees. So this is where you're working with third-party processors, making sure you bring people on board that have the appropriate mechanisms in place to protect personal data. Failure to maintain a detailed record of processing. So this is understanding the data you process, mapping your data and putting it into a record of processing. And also failure to cooperate with the ICO. A few more examples here. So failure to notify the ICO of any data breaches within the 72-hour time frame. Failure to notify data subjects of a data breach. Failure to complete data impact assessments. Or failure to appoint an independent and fully supported data protection officer or DPO where required. So you'll see there's lots of different examples of which the ICO can fine you, and as I've said, the fines are substantially bigger under GDPR as well. So that's F for fines. Please join us on our next video, which will be on G for GDPR. Thank you.